Hi, my name is Haley Green,
And my name is Erica Walker.
and today we're going to be talking about early and middle childhood development.
I'm going to talk about the early childhood development. So, in this stage, children start expressing their emotions, but not to an extreme degree. Like a child can be angry, but they won't be explosive. Children they rely on their parents for their guidance and growth during this stage. Once children get older, they are able to gain an intrinsic motivation, which is where children will want to do activities for their own enjoyment as opposed to their parents' enjoyment. So as children get older, they gain more independence, but at this stage, they rely heavily on their parents. For social development, it's categorized in Erikson's third stage of development in initiative versus guilt. Children want to be able to express their emotions, but the problem is they will feel guilty expressing a certain emotion. Since their parents are a huge factor in their lives, they want to be able to express their emotions with them, but they're afraid because they don't want their emotions to cause harm to anybody. So that's where the guilt portion of it lies. And children have a deeper social relationship with their parents because friends are not as essential in this stage. Children develop imaginary friends, which is basically them talking to themselves in a form of an imaginary person that they create. On to parenting. So there are a couple of different types of parenting. The one I'm going to talk about is authoritative parenting. This type of parenting is where the word is law, and the parents will give clear rules to their children, and if they break the rules, then they will suffer consequences of punishment. These parents have high standards for their kids, and they discuss emotions rarely with their children. Um, and parents, they try to guide their children to an optimal balance so that they're able to be emotionally stable and be able to be just stable in general. Children in the stage, like I've mentioned, are more dependent on their parents, so they will imitate what their parents do for some sort of acknowledgement or attention. So if their parents were to cover their mouth when something would happen, they would imitate that because they think that's something that they should do. Some factors of childhood stress involve four types of anger. This type of aggression includes reactive, relational, bullying, and instrumental. So reactive aggression is when a kid will react to what someone says. So if a kid was insulted, the way they would react is the reactive aggression. Relational is the more verbal approach. So if a kid were to be insulted, they would express their emotions verbally. Bullying is basically when a kid will pick on somebody else, and this impairs self-esteem and development in children. And then instrumental aggression is when children will take something they don't have because they want it. Another factor of childhood stress involves child abuse and maltreatment. So children who are affected by child abuse or maltreatment become more fearful by noise. They have more trust issues with people, and they tend to be more standoffish with other people. And some similarities between early and middle childhood is that emotional expression is based off of cultural upbringing. So some cultures will display pride in different ways than others, and that is something that's common throughout life, not just in the early childhood development portion. And bullying is definitely a huge factor in life, or in early and middle stages, because both social and child stress evolves from that. Divorce is also something that's common between the two developmental periods. Divorce from ages 3 to 18, children are impacted by divorce because they still live with their parents unless it's a unique circumstance. And most children are impacted by divorce. They start partaking in troublesome behavior like substance abuse, and they'll have issues in mental health.
And so now that she's talked about early childhood, we'll progress into middle childhood. So middle childhood, when they emotionally develop, it's the development is staggering. Middle childhood is when children seek to gain independence and autonomy from their parents. Responsibility is more prevalent in this stage. Roles like homework, chores, and allowances is introduced because of the responsibility. Children this age also develop a self-concept, forming generalizations about themselves and taking from others to form this self-concept. Over time, the self-concept becomes more specific and logical, but it also becomes less optimistic due to the comparisons to other people. This also plays into the role of self-esteem because this is when with self-concept comes self-esteem. So another emotional development that is hugely important in middle childhood is resiliency. And resiliency is the ability to be able to cope with an adversity or a traumatic event. So children can either cope with it in a negative or positive way. But what resiliency is to cope in either way. But the dynamic systems theory says that no one is unaffected by a traumatic event. So no matter how well a child can cope, there will still be long-term effects. And also, in early childhood, children seek to earn the approval of the parents, while in middle childhood, children seek to approve the approval of their friends and also seek independence. So, in social development, children in middle childhood learn the concept of comparison, like self-esteem, and when they compare themselves to each other, this is the stage called industry versus inferiority stage. It's in Erickson's theory. Children compete with each other in school and prepare to take on adult roles. This stage either ends with a feeling of confidence or a feeling of inferiority due to the comparison to others. Um, Social development in this stage is peer groups. Peer groups are vital during this period. Children try to fit in with their friends and gain social acceptance. And social hierarchy starts to matter during this time. Popularity, unfortunately, starts to matter and plays a huge part in the way a person shapes themselves and their self-esteem. Um, the parenting patterns are similar with early and middle childhood. They are authoritarian, authoritative, permissive, and uninvolved. And permissive or indulgent parenting is when the parents have low expectations of the child. They rarely discipline, inconsistent with the rules that they set for the children, and the children feel insecure due to the lack of boundaries and the lack of stability that the parents set for them. Also, uninvolved parenting. Uh, Parents make few demands of their children. They provide basic needs like food and shelter and water, but they are completely uninvolved in the child's life. There's little warmth and love that come from the parents, and they'll even go as far to unintentionally or intentionally avoid their children. Children feel very insecure in this stage. They have to provide for themselves, and they fear becoming dependent on other people, and they have more stress and they act in more delinquent ways than children who have parents who display other types of parenting styles. This also plays into the childhood stress. Accumulated stresses over time have more of an impact than an isolating stress because in this stage resiliency comes into play, and resiliency is able to cope with an isolated event. So children have a much easier time coping with an isolated event rather than accumulated stresses because it creeps up on you over time. It builds and builds. um, Effects of the stress on children in this stage are anxiety, depression, isolation, delinquent behaviors, and bullying. Like Erica mentioned before, divorce is very similar between the two stages. In divorce, parents tend to shift the focus away from their children onto themselves because they think that my life is in shambles and I have to focus on me. But to get the focus back on the children will act out in delinquent behaviors to say, hey, notice me, love me, um, because that's the only way that they think that their parents will pay attention to them. And like she said, between ages of 3 to 18 are when children are most affected. So that's when it takes a toll on the children the most. And in the family structure, during middle childhood, children need five things from their families. They need physical necessities like food and shelter. They need learning, self respect, peer relationships that we said was so important, and harmony and stability. Families who have a stable and static environment, meaning that the daily routines stay the same, are the most optimal um, parent uh, structure that a child can have. Two parent families are preferable to single parent families, and uh, families that have same sex parents have no um, indication of changes in development for the child as well. So while there are a lot of similarities like divorce, parenting structure, parenting styles in early and middle development, there are also a lot of differences as well, like especially in social and emotional development. The focus in early childhood is mainly on the parent's approval, and in middle childhood, that changes. It is all about friends and fitting in with friends and being popular, unfortunately. But self concept and resiliency comes into play during this stage, which is very important. So I'd say that's all we have. Do you think we know? No, I don't. Okay. All right. Well, this is our project. Thank you for listening.